Have you ever heard of a death so strange that even the ocean refused to keep it quiet? This is not the tale of a king or an admiral or a nobleman whose name was etched in stone. It is the story of a woman who dressed as a man, fought as a pirate, and whose fate slipped quietly into the shadows of the sea. Mary Read, a name whispered in taverns, muttered by sailors, and buried in court records that seem to say too little, yet hide too much. The ocean remembers her differently than history does. It remembers her as a figure who walked between two worlds, neither fully man nor fully woman in the eyes of her crew, but always a fighter. She had learned deception early. Her childhood forced her to wear another life as a mask, pretending to be a boy to secure survival. That disguise became her strength. And when the sea called her, Mary Read answered, not as a hidden woman, but as a pirate equal to any man on the deck. Imagine standing aboard a Caribbean sloop, the air thick with gunpowder smoke, the sails torn by cannon fire. At the heart of the chaos, you see her, blade raised, defiance burning in her stance, her voice sharp as thunder. For many, the sight was unsettling. A pirate who revealed herself not with shame, but with power. Did the sea shiver when she shouted in battle? Or was it the men around her who realized gender meant nothing when steel met steel? In 1720, fate tightened its grip. Alongside Calico Jack and Bonny, Mary fought to the last when their ship was boarded by authorities. The men cowered below deck, but Mary and Anne did not. Court records tell us she cursed them, shouted at them to fight like men while she stood her ground. But courage, no matter how fierce, cannot hold back the weight of law. Captured, shackled, dragged into a world where pirates met the gallows, Mary faced an ending she had long defied. Or did she? Some say she died in prison, claimed by fever before the rope could claim her. Others whisper that the sea would not release her so easily, that she escaped, vanishing into the shadows, her fate unresolved. The silence of her ending feels too deliberate, too carefully erased. And in that silence, the sea seems to speak louder than the truth ever could. What if you stood on that deck, watching her being led away in chains? Would you believe she was destined for death? Or would you wonder if Mary Read found a way to slip beyond history's reach? Because some pirates vanish into darkness not as victims, but as legends. And Mary's shadow still lingers, haunting the silence of the sea. The disguise was never just clothing. For Mary Read, it was survival stitched into fabric, deception woven into every seam. Long before the sea, she had already learned that the world granted more power to a boy than to a girl. Her mother, desperate after the death of Mary's half-brother, dressed the child as him to secure an inheritance. So Mary grew up in the skin of another identity, a borrowed life shaped by lies. But what begins as necessity can grow into armor. That disguise would carry her farther than anyone imagined, from quiet streets to roaring battlefields. As a young soldier, she fought in wars across Europe, still hidden beneath her mask of manhood. Records tell us she rode in the cavalry, charging into fire and smoke, blade flashing as though she had been born to war. No one suspected, or perhaps they did but turned away, unwilling to question a comrade who fought with more fury than most. Soldiers whispered of her courage. Officers praised her resolve. And yet, in those moments, was Mary living as herself, or as a ghost of someone she had never been allowed to abandon? When war ended, she sought peace in the form of marriage, dropping her disguise long enough to reveal her true self. But peace is fleeting for those who have tasted the edge of steel. Widowed and restless, she returned to her armor, the identity that had shielded her since childhood. The sea was calling, and in answering, she chose a life that blurred all boundaries. Aboard Calico Jack's ship, she stepped into a world where law did not rule, but the code of the crew did. Pirates, for all their brutality, had strange laws of their own, division of plunder, votes in council, loyalty sealed by blood. Among them, Mary stood as one of the fiercest. Some said she revealed her secret to the crew only when it became unavoidable. Others claim she never intended to hide it from those she trusted. The truth, like the sea itself, is uncertain. The capture came not with the glory of a great battle, but with the sting of betrayal and exhaustion. In October of 1720, the winds turned against Calico Jack's crew. Their ship, once a predator of the Caribbean, drifted vulnerable near Jamaica. The authorities struck swiftly, descending upon them with a fury sharpened by years of chasing pirates through the islands. For most aboard, courage faltered. Drunk, weary, or unwilling, the men slumped below deck, hiding in shadows as iron approached. But Mary Reed and Bonny did not cower. The two women stood alone against the storm, blades drawn, curses flying louder than the crack of muskets. Witnesses later swore that Mary's fury was unmatched. She shouted down into the hold, demanding the men fight like sailors, like men, instead of cowards. The silence of their refusal echoed louder than cannon fire. When the fight ended, the women were dragged in chains, bloodied but unbroken. The trial was swift, but the courtroom atmosphere was heavy with unease. Lanterns flickered against stone walls as the accused pirates were paraded before the magistrates. Calico Jack, stripped of the terror he once commanded, heard his death sentence without defiance. But Mary stood taller than her chains. Court records, preserved in the general history of the pirates, capture her voice. Sharp, unrepentant, alive with rage. She did not beg for mercy. She spat defiance. Yet here, history bends into something stranger. Both Mary and Anne claimed pleading the belly, declaring themselves with child, which under English law delayed execution. It was a tactic often used, but for Mary, it was a twist of fate. Did she carry a life within her, or was it only another disguise, a final attempt to bend the rules that had always shackled her? The records say she was spared the noose. For a time. What happened next is where the shadows grow thick. The official line: Mary died in prison in early 1721, fever taking her before the rope could. No burial site is known, no marker ever placed. Just a note in a ledger, her name reduced to a line of ink. But sailors whispered something else, that a woman like Mary would never let herself fade behind stone walls. Rumors spread of a daring escape, a bribe, a storm that covered her flight. Some believed she walked free under yet another disguise, vanishing into the mist as she had so many times before. And the silence of her death is almost too perfect. No witnesses, no grave, no certainty, only a story that ends where legend begins. The sea does not forget its rebels, and Mary Reed, whether buried in a prison grave or vanished into the fog, became more than flesh and blood. She became a shadow in the minds of those who told her story. A ghost who lived not in chains but in whispers. Legends cling to her name because she unsettled the order of things. A woman who fought with the ferocity of a storm, who lived between masks and truths, who refused to bend even when death closed in. For sailors, her memory carried a strange weight. They spoke of her in taverns by candlelight, lowering their voices as if she might overhear. Some claimed her spirit walked the decks of captured ships, urging cowards to rise and fight. Others said her presence lingered in the prison stones of Jamaica, where chains still rattled in the night with no one to wear them. The line between history and haunting blurred. Storytellers found in Mary a kind of mirror, reflecting their own struggles against the tides of power. A woman who became a soldier, then a pirate, then a legend. How could she not be remembered? Her life carried the paradox of freedom and imprisonment, disguise and revelation, death and survival. Each retelling seemed to add another layer of myth, as though the truth itself resisted being pinned down. And in that resistance, her story grew stronger, more eternal. There is a psychological pull in figures like Mary. She unsettles the comfortable certainties of the past. She reminds us that identity is fluid, that defiance can carry a person beyond the boundaries others try to impose. For men of the sea, she was proof that loyalty and strength mattered more than the body one was born into. For women, she became a spectral figure of possibility, proof that even in an age that denied them, one could seize power, if only at the edge of a blade. But the unraveling of Mary Read's story is not like the neat endings of ballads or court records. It drifts, unfinished, like a ship without anchor. The sea has a way of swallowing truth, of letting only fragments rise to the surface. A fevered death in a darkened cell, a secret escape paid with hidden gold, a nameless grave, or a voyage no one saw. Each possibility hangs like mist above black water, and none can be proven. That is the weight of her legend. The silence is louder than the facts. For historians, the line ends in ink. Mary read, dead in prison. Nothing more. But silence on a page has never been enough to quiet the sea. Sailors swore they felt her presence when fear clawed at their throats, when storms threatened to break their masts. They whispered her name like a curse or a prayer. In the creak of wood at night, in the shiver of a lantern's flame, she was there, urging, defying, reminding them that courage comes not from what the world calls you, but from what you choose to become. And yet, her legend is heavier than inspiration. There is tragedy in her shadow, a life forced into disguise, a spirit that could never rest, an ending too uncertain to be laid to peace. Was it freedom she found, or another prison without walls? Perhaps that is the truest curse of the sea. Not death itself, but the way it leaves us asking questions that will never be answered. Picture yourself once more at the edge of a ship's deck, the mist curling low, the horizon lost to night. The ocean moves beneath you, endless and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Mary's story lingers, half truth, half ghost, bound forever to the silence that swallowed her. And in that silence, you may realize something unsettling. Some pirate deaths never rest, because the silence of the sea speaks louder than any truth.